Let me know when you're ready, Sheikh. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen wa sallallahu wa sallam wa barak ala nabina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. So inshallah ta'ala tonight we'll continue our commentary on the book Muslim Morals and Manners. And we reached the section which I have entitled Islamic Guidelines and Standards for Dealing with Others. And as we mentioned previously, this is the section of the work which informs us of the rights of others, their status in Islam, and how we are expected to please Allah by observing those rights. And we started out with the rights of the parents, because after Allah, no one has more rights over us than our parents. Then we went to those who follow them in terms of priority, which are the blood relatives. And now we've reached those who follow them in terms of priority, which is our spouses, the husband and wife. So after your parents and after your blood relatives, nobody has more right over you. No one has more right to your kindness, to your respect, to your good treatment than your spouse. And before we continue, because we'll do like a cursory review of what we covered last week and then we'll continue, I just want to say that alhamdulillah, in this mosque there are quite a few classes or educational programs that are running on a weekly basis. And that's good, because in a lot of masajid you'll find that they have nothing. There's nothing going on. It's just the 5 daily prayers, if that, in some masajid. So it's good that they have programs and means for people to get educated and to have their spirits lifted, etc. So that's good. But one of the problems is that the attendance isn't always what we hope it would be. And even if we get the attendance we want, wa alaikum salam, attending these classes, for those who attend them, they really won't do those people any good. It won't do us any good, brothers and sisters, to attend classes if we don't apply what we hear to ourselves. If we don't see ourselves in the class. And if we don't make a conscious effort to reform ourselves in light of what we're learning. So if we're just coming and taking notes and then taking the notebook and throwing it in the backseat of the car until the next week, then we're not going to really get the benefit of the class. But we could get the harm of the class. Because there's two types of knowledge. There's an ilm al-nafi', the beneficial knowledge, wal ilm al-dar, and the knowledge that harms you. Which shows you there's no such thing as neither harmful or beneficial. No, it's one or the other. And the knowledge which benefits you is the knowledge which you practice. And knowledge which harms you are those things that you know, but you don't practice. So we need to make it a point to see ourselves in the talk and try to reform ourselves accordingly. Wherever we have issues, wherever we have areas that we need to shore up, we need to actively try to make those corrections. With that said, we started last week with this topic of kindness between husband and wife. And we spoke about, or we started out with some questions. Why do people get married? And we discussed that, and people talked about the different reasons, and there are many different reasons why people get married. And some of those reasons were good, and some of them were bad, and so we asked the next question, are these the right or wrong reasons? And some of them were right, and some of them were wrong. And then we asked, how can each of these motives affect the outcome of marriage? So basically, if you have some of those wrong intentions, the wrong reasons, what can that do to the outcome? How can that affect the outcome? And we talked about that. Then we asked another question, should we hope to get something out of marriage? Should you go into marriage expecting to get something out of it? And I think we all agree that, yeah, you have every right to expect to get something out. But what should you expect? And those expectations, again, can affect the outcome of marriage. If you have ridiculous expectations, if you have unrealistic expectations, then that will affect the outcome of the marriage. And then finally, we said, more important than what we expect to get out of it is what Allah expects or wants us to get out of it. What does He want couples to get out of it? And that's where our focus needs to be. Not so much what I want, but what Allah wants. And so then we came and we mentioned 3 things that we gather from the Quran that Allah wants couples to get out of marriage. And we said the first one was be a garment for each other. And the proof for that is from Surah Al-Baqarah, the 2nd Surah, verse 187, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ. He said that your wives are a garment for you, and you are a garment for them. And we talked about how that means 4 things. First of all, they're a covering that conceals faults. He said that's one of the meanings of the wife and the husband being a garment for each other, that they conceal each other's faults. The second one is that they are a bed for one another, a partner in intercourse, right? We said another meaning is a wrapper, which alludes to closeness. They are the closest person to you, okay? And you're supposed to be close to each other in the sense of what? That you exchange affection, expressions of affection. And then finally, a relaxant, that they are to put each other at ease and to bring peace and tranquility to each other. And all that falls under the category of, or the first thing that Allah wants us to get out of marriage, to be a garment for each other, to find a garment. And those are the meanings of that. The second thing we said was live with each other acceptably. And we said that comes from Surah An-Nisa, the 4th Surah, verse 19, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَاشِرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and live with them in a manner which is generally accepted as good. And then finally, foster tranquility, love, and mercy. That basically, eyes on the prize. And what is the prize? What is your goal? What is your objective? What are you trying to achieve from your marriage? What should you and your wife be mutually giving to each other, or creating for each other, or fostering for each other? We said tranquility, love, and mercy. And then the question came, obviously, of how. Okay? So this is what we're supposed to be doing. This is what our marriages are supposed to produce. But how do we go about producing that? And we mentioned there was a traditional method that people traditionally say the way you go about it is that you look at marriage as huquq and wajibat. You look at marriage as rights and duties. Rights that you're entitled to, duties that you owe. And that's it. And we said that that's fine, that's okay, but it's not necessarily going to produce the desired results, and we mentioned some of the reasons why. And we said that, for example, sometimes what happens is that couples will come to think that that's all marriage is. That I just do what I'm supposed to do, and she does what she's supposed to do, and everything will be fine. And that's not always the case. So what happens sometimes is that a man is emotionally distant. He's verbally abusive. And then when he's taken up on that, he'll say, when his wife expresses her dissatisfaction with that, she's unhappy about that, he'll say, why are you complaining? You have a house to live in, you have clothes on your back, you have food in the refrigerator, I'm doing my job, So he thinks that he's a perfect husband because what? He's fulfilling her rights. Okay? And the truth, or the opposite is also true for the woman, that she'll, have certain duties, and she'll maybe behave in a way which is unacceptable to the husband. And then when he takes her up on that, she'll say, well, I'm doing X, Y, and Z. These are your rights. I'm fulfilling those, so you can't ask me for anything else. So we said that's one of the problems with what? Taking that approach of the traditional method. That marriage is just rights and what duties. And also, we said it also leads to something that we're going to talk about, or we talked about last week, which is scorekeeping. That basically each spouse is just taking a running tally of what they've done and expecting the other spouse to what? Reciprocate in kind. Compensate them. I gave you your right, so you give me my right in return. And we said that scorekeeping is harmful to the marriage, and we talked about that in detail when we got to what? The actual practical methods of how. So then we said that what spouses should do, instead of just looking at marriage as rights and duties, is that they should basically look at what marriage is supposed to produce and turn to the Quran and Sunnah and common sense for guidance on how they should conduct themselves to bring that about. That they should have an objective-based approach to their marriage. That basically, what logically speaking and textually speaking should I be doing to create tranquility, love, and mercy in my marriage, to make myself a garment for my spouse, and to live with them in a way which is acceptable. And so we started on that path, and we mentioned first and foremost, treat your spouse as you would like to be treated. So that was the first thing that we talked about, and we talked about it in detail. Whatever you're expecting, then expect to give the same thing. The next thing we said was don't keep score. And we talked about that in detail. And we gave the example of a scorekeeper who says, I keep a running tally of the things my partner does. Leisure activities, outings with friends, the amount of time spent with our children, and chores completed. I'm keeping a tally of all of this. I'm writing it down so I can use it later. Everything they say and do is what? Will be used against them. I never let my spouse get the upper hand. And when they mess up, I never give them a free pass. If I do my spouse a favor, and we said, listen to this word. Is there such thing as a favor in marriage? People shouldn't think like that, but people do. I make sure to remind them every chance I get and mention the great inconvenience that favor caused me. So people have that tendency of what? Keeping score, and their attitude is what? What have you done for me lately? 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 And what that does basically is that spoils the marriage. And that doesn't bring about love. That doesn't bring about tranquility. That doesn't bring about mercy. That makes a person feel like they're what? They're at a job and there's going to be an annual review and they have to basically live up to certain expectations or they're going to be what? Reprimanded. That's what that does. Thumma dhalik, we talked about lifting your partner up and not putting them down. And that people have a tendency sometimes in marriage to insult each other, to criticize each other, and to say mean and cruel things. And we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ prohibited us to insult one another and to speak to each other impolitely, and that we should choose the best and nicest way to speak to one another. So we spoke about that in detail. We come to this, because that's where we stopped, if I'm not mistaken. We did stop at lift your partner up. That's where we stopped, right? Alhamdulillah? Okay, alhamdulillah. So we'll start here. You can catch more flies with honey. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam, he said in the hadith, alaykum bil-rifq. فإن الرفق لا يكون في شيء إلا زانه ولا ينزع من شيء إلا شانه. He says, I implore you to be gentle. Gentleness never accompanies anything except that it beautifies it, and is not removed from anything except that it makes it detestable. He also said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, إن الله رفيق يحب الرفق يعطي على الرفق ما لا يعطي على العنف وما لا سواه. He says, verily Allah is gentle and He loves gentleness. He gives through gentleness what he does not give through harshness. And this line, this part right here is critical. He gives through gentleness what he does not give through harshness or any other approach besides it. So sometimes we want to get our spouse to do something, to behave in a certain way. And we think the way to get them to do that is to be abrasive, to tell them off. But the Prophet is telling us, no, you're going to have more success if you what? If you say it nicely, if you say it gently, if you deal with them in a way which is what? Which is lenient or has some lenience to it. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala also in the Quran, He informs us of the effect that being gentle and lenient can have on others, even those who themselves are harsh and brutal. So He says, فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ. He tells us to be gentle, to deal with people gently, to respond to their cruelty with kindness. And He says, what's the result? You will find that the one who had previously been your most bitter enemy will become your nearest and dearest friend. And now this correlation between kindness, gentleness, and civility, the correlation between those three things and the feelings of love, loyalty, and affection, this is not something which is only supported by the Quran and Hadith. It's not something you have to necessarily look up in a book, but it's something supported by common sense. People are more likely to respond positively and get along with one another when they are handled with care, treated with respect, and dealt with in a gentle manner. While harshness, on the other hand, tends to put people on the defensive, cause aversion, and run them away. Allah speaks about this in the Quran when He says, فَبِمَا رَحْمَةٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ لِنْتَ لَهُمْ وَلَوْ كُنْتَ فَضًّا غَلِيظَ الْقَلْبِ لَانْفَضُّوا مِنْ حَوْلِكَ. And it was but by the mercy of Allah that you dealt with them gently. Had you been strident and cruel-hearted, they would have fled from about you. So this is another critical point that will help us to achieve the objective of marriage, and that is what? To be gentle, to be kind, and to follow this slogan, you can catch more flies with honey. Whatever you're trying to achieve in your life or with your spouse, you're going to be able to do it. You're more likely to achieve it if you're what? If you're gentle, if you're kind, if you're lenient, etc. Next one. Accentuate the positive. What does that mean? Accentuate the positive. Any takers? Anybody want to explain what that means?
Encourage the good.
Encourage the good. That's not bad. Anybody else want to take a stab at that? Accentuate the positive. What do you guys think that means? Ladies, you can speak up. There's no problem. What do you think accentuate the positive means? No takers?
Highlight the good things.
Yes.
Say it again.
Highlight the good things.
Highlight the good things. Good. So, basically, is there such thing as a perfect spouse?
No.
So every spouse is going to have what? An upside and a what? Downside. Alright? So now when you look at that spouse and you see the upside and the downside, where should your focus be?
Upside.
On the upside. It shouldn't be on what? What they can't do, what they don't have, but rather should be what? On the things that they do well, that they do have, etc. This is essential because it is impossible to be happy in a relationship if you have a cup half empty, grass is greener on the other side mentality. If all you can see is what your spouse doesn't have, can't do, won't give, will never become, or otherwise lacks. No spouse is perfect. Every human being, by virtue of being human, has shortcomings and imperfections. Because al-kamalu lillah, perfection belongs to Allah exclusively. So if you, oh husband or wife, if you want to be happy, you have to learn to accentuate the positive and downplay the negative you perceive in your partner. And the Prophet ﷺ, he spoke about this when he said, لا يفرق مؤمن مؤمنة إن كره منها خلقا رضي منها آخر. Let not any believing man despise a believing woman. If he dislikes some quality that she has, He is undoubtedly pleased by another. So what happens sometimes is that your spouse, they say something, they do something that you don't like, you don't appreciate, you don't approve of, or they behave in a way that you don't approve of. And that puts like a little bit of a strain or some tension in the marriage or whatever, the relationship. And when that happens, you're going to have to address it. We're going to talk about that. But at the same time, you can't blow that thing out of proportion. And what will help you to avoid doing that is to look at what? The good things. As you find your mind focusing on what? Man, she does that. You know, that just really gets my goat. And as you find yourself focusing on that and thinking about how you're going to react to that, when you find yourself doing that, that's when you need to what? Take a step back and start looking at what? Yeah, but she also does this thing. She also has that thing. And she has this quality that I like. Start enumerating the good things to what? To bring yourself back to what? To center. And to look at the situation in a holistic fashion and not to what? To make a rash decision. So that's what we mean by accentuate the positive. But the next thing, spend quality time. Spend quality time. Okay? It is difficult, if not impossible, for two people to solidify their relationship and foster love and mercy between themselves when one of them is always absent or too busy to spend time with the other. Wa alaikum salam. So basically, ya ikhwan, how can you strengthen your relationship if you're always apart? Perhaps this is why when a woman came to the Prophet ﷺ and asked his advice about a man who had proposed to her, the Prophet deemed him unsuitable, and he explained why, saying, أَمَّا فُلَانٌ فَلَا يَضَعْ عَصَاهُ عَنْ عَاتِقِهِ. He said, as for so-and-so, he never takes his staff off of his shoulder. According to some of the scholars, ya ikhwan, the meaning is that he is always traveling. He's always absent. And rarely remains in one place for any length of time. That's what some of the scholars explain the meaning of the hadith to be. That the person what? He's always what? He's always traveling. So the Prophet ﷺ realized the importance of this matter to the point that he what? He discouraged the woman from marrying a man who would always be what? Absent. And not only did he tell people that, but he practiced it himself. So he was keen to spend quality time with his family. Ibn al-Qayyim, he writes, each day, after the Asr prayer, the Prophet ﷺ would go around and visit all of his wives, drawing close to each one of them and asking her about her condition and needs. His wives used to gather in the house of the wife with whom the Prophet would spend the night, and they would all eat dinner together. Then each would depart to her own apartment. Once he had prayed al-Isha, he would enter his home and chat with his wife before sleeping to entertain and amuse her thereby. So he would make it a point to what? To visit each wife, give her some specific time, find out what her needs were, chat her up, so to speak. Then he would have dinner with all of them. And then after that, he would come to the wife who he would spend the night with and what? And again, talk to her and, basically amuse her, etc. Another way he would spend time with them was by helping them with their chores and household responsibilities. As Aisha, she said, كان يكون في مهنة أهله فإذا حضرت الصلاة خرج إلى الصلاة. So she said, the Prophet ﷺ used to be at the service of his family, meaning that he helped them around the house. So if he was there in the house and they were cleaning, whatever they were doing, he would do what? He would join in those chores. But when the time for prayer came, he left to offer the prayer. And so what this means that the husband and wife should strive to do things that they would normally do separately together. So basically they try to be creative in finding ways that they can spend time together. And they do this in an effort to increase the quality time they spend with each other. So this includes, for example, like the Prophet, household chores, cooking, cleaning, laundry, washing the dishes, whatever the case may be. That's what? If they do it together, it's time that they're spending together. So you have to be creative sometimes because brothers get busy and they have jobs and they have responsibilities. But we still have to do what? We have to be creative and try to make time for each other. ثم بعد ذلك, be affectionate. Be affectionate. Brothers and sisters, kisses and hugs, hand-holding, and other expressions of affection, they don't cost us anything. But a lot of people, unfortunately, are very stingy when it comes to offering these expressions of affection to their spouses. Brothers and sisters, your partner doesn't just want you to tell them that you love them. And you should tell them. As the Prophet said, مَنْ أَحَبَّ أَخَاهُ فَلْيُخْبِرَهُ. He said, whoever amongst you loves his brother, then let him what? Tell him, let him inform him. So if this is the case with your brother, another Muslim, it's certainly the case with your spouse. So you should tell them. But they don't just want you to tell them, they want you to show them, right? They want to feel your love. If they don't, those words will just be that. Words. With little effect and no real meaning. The Prophet ﷺ certainly understood this. As Ibn al-Qayyim, he writes, وَكَانَتْ إِذَا شَرِبَتْ مِنْ الْإِنَاءِ أَخَذَهُ فَوَضَعَ فَمَهُ فِي مَوْضِعِ فَمِهَا وَالشَّرِبْ وكان إذا تعرقت عرقا وهو العظم الذي عليه لحم أخذه فوضع فمه موضع فمها. He says, if she, referring to Aisha radiallahu anha, if she drank from a vessel, he would take it and put his mouth where her lips had been. And if she ate meat from a bone, he would take the bone and place his mouth where hers had been. وكان يتكئ في حجرها ويقرأ القرآن ورأسه في حجرها وربما كانت حائضا وكان يأمرها وهي حائض وكان يأمرها وهي حائض فتتزر ثم يباشرها وكان يقبلها وهو صائم وربما مد يده إلى بعض نسائه في حضرة باقيهن. He says, he used to lie down in her apartment with his head on her lap and recite the Quran, even if she was menstruating. When her period came, he didn't distance himself from her or make her feel unwanted. Rather, he would command her to tie a piece of cloth around her midsection, and then he would fondle her. And he would kiss while he was fasting. He would sometimes hold hands with one of his wives in the presence of the others. So this is the guidance of the Prophet ﷺ in this regard. This is a portion of the guidance of the Prophet in this regard. And we know that the Prophet, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You have the Messenger of Allah, the most excellent example. So this is what I wanted to share tonight, although we do have quite a bit of time left. So what I'll do, I guess, shall we go on, or you guys want to discuss? Discuss or go on? It's up to you. Huh?
We are taking a nap.
You're taking a nap?
Not me.
Ajay, because the lights are off, huh?
Because nobody answering you. But I like this picture all the way to the right, in the corner, with the blue.
The blue. At top. The one on top. You like this one?
No.
The other right.
Right.
The other right. MashaAllah. I didn't even say right.
But do you mind if I make a comment about it?
تفضل.
Are you telling us to do this in public? Because it seems that these ladies are wearing their clothes and fully, so it seems that they are in public. So we.
Who's in public? This one?
All of them. Because they are not sitting home like this with all this clothes, hijab, and. So this is the message. You understand that we do this in front of brothers in the backyard and other people visiting, and the woman that hugging her husband from the back, and all these things. Are you telling us to do this affection in public?
Well, I think that it's permissible to do some affection in public. Yeah, there's no question.
Can you prove this?
Can I prove it?
Yeah.
Well, the Prophet ﷺ, he used to hold hands with his wife in front of others.
No, this is not hadith. He said qad and maybe.
No, he didn't say qad. He said what can.
He did not show hadith. He said rubbama wa rubbama.
No, he said, not this way.
See, Akhi, when the Prophet ﷺ was making race with Aisha, he asked the army to go ahead so they have a privacy, you understand, him and her, to be racing together. So, as example, this girl that wearing a green and hugging, you understand, this not in the house.
Okay, let me ask you. Well, let me ask you a question, Sheikh. Let me ask you this question. Because let me ask this question. Showing affection, is it a religious issue, an act of worship, or a non-religious issue?
You want me to answer your question, or you want me to bring you to the point? We are not debating the issue of affection. We're talking about can we display these things like what it shows in the picture?
Okay,
kissing, hugging, be so close to each other.
I'll be honest with you. I have no problem with this. I'm be honest with you. I have no problem with this in public.
Okay.
I have no problem with this in public.
Okay.
I have no problem with this in public. You know, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
You know, I don't.
It's fine.
I don't.
I disagree with you.
Okay. That won't be the first time.
We don't have anything. No.
That won't be the first time. It won't be the last either.
Of course, whenever I have something I disapprove, I'm going to tell you.
And I appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I always respect that.
You're a knowledgeable person, you understand. I have no doubt about it, but you don't have any support that any of these things done by the Sahaba in front of each other.
Well, what I can say is this, again, because you mentioned the thing about support, and that's why I mentioned the question I said, is that, I mean, first of all, we can support it with the action of the Prophet ﷺ, but even if we leave that, because it's a non-religious issue, the asl is what? Al-hil wal-ibaha. The asl is permissible. So the person who wants to say tahreem, who wants to make it prohibited, the burden of proof is on them. Not
Very
the one
good. So tell me, what is the limitation of hugging and kissing in public? So we be doing like the public, the kuffar, you understand?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. I didn't say that.
Is there a limitation for it?
I'm sure there is a limitation.
What it is?
The limitation will be governed by urf, by custom.
Which urf? Urf kuffar or Muslimin?
No, it won't be the urf of the kuffar. It's never be the urf of the
Do you
kuffar.
ever see somebody doing this while you're walking in Mecca or Jeddah or any place?
These are Muslims doing this right here. There's a Muslim doing it right here. What are you talking about? They look like they might be in Mecca somewhere. Sitting on the sidewalk right there in Mecca. Tired from making tawaf. Tired, sitting down. It's going to be all right, baby. We're going to go to the hotel in a minute. I'm going to get a cab. It's going to be all right.
But me, myself, ever since a little boy, I always been shy of doing stuff like that.
Allah is a khair. Allah is a khair. طيب. Any other things? Any other points, Ikhwan?
In public.
I have a question.
تفضل.
You know, the Sheikh has pointed out that picture on the top right. I want to understand the concept of the woman being submissive to the husband. What is this? How do we understand this?
How do you understand which thing?
The concept of the woman the wife being submissive to the husband.
You're talking about the picture or just in general?
Well, the picture, that one points it out the most. It looks like it, but so it reminded me of that.
Well, I don't necessarily think that you can glean from it necessarily submissiveness. I think, culturally speaking, that's just a way of showing affection. The man might turn around and do the same thing to the woman. So the woman is pictured here, you kind of like putting her head on the man's hands, like kissing the man's hands, whatever it is. But I don't think necessarily you should glean from that
Well, regardless
anything
of the
like
the concept of submissiveness, how do we understand this? Is this based on urf as well? Or is this...
طيب, there's no question that Islam, it encourages a woman to obey her husband. There's no question about that. And the proof for that is, or the proofs for that are numerous. So, for example, the statement of the Prophet, the statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which he said, وَلِلْرِجَالِ عَلَيْهِنَّ دَرَجَةً, and men have a degree over women. And the scholars of Islam of tafsir, they said, al-imara wa-ta'a, that basically they have this, they're in this leadership role, and they have the right to obedience. And the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned in a number of different hadiths, some of them he mentioned directly, some of them he mentioned indirectly, that a woman is expected to what? To obey her husband. So basically, what a woman tries to do to the best of her ability is to obey her husband and do what he asks, as long as he doesn't ask her to do something which is beyond her capacity, or to do something which is prohibited. And I think that's what, if we're going to use that word submissiveness, that's what we mean by submissiveness in Islam. That's what we mean. Does that answer your question? But I just want to say something, because the Sheikh, he makes a good point. We have to be modest, and we don't want to imitate the kuffar, because that's another part of our deen. We don't want to imitate the kuffar. And I show these images not necessarily because I approve of each and everything being done in public, but I will say this, is that I think that we have a tendency to have issues in Islam with what? With showing affection. And so that's why I bring the images. So you can see that this is, just so you can see it's nothing wrong with being affectionate with your wife. Now, the Sheikh, he makes a point, there's a time and a place, and I agree with that. But at the same time, the point I'm trying to make is that we can't be afraid, we can't be uncomfortable with being what? Affectionate with each other. Okay? We can't be the people who the only time we're affectionate is at night, in the bedroom, when the lights are on. That's the only affection that we share with our spouses. It shouldn't be like that. And that wasn't the way the Prophet was. That's the point. Sheikh makes a good point. Jazakallah khair. I always respect what he says. I appreciate these words of advice and wisdom from an elderly scholar. We don't always agree. We butt heads a lot, but I appreciate it. You have to know that. Allah is khair.
Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah feek.
Well, as you, mashallah, jazakallah khair, you remind us with two hadith here, that how the Prophet ﷺ used to take the cup that Aisha drank from him, and he's intentionally turning the cup in his hand, so he can put his mouth or his lips on the same place
where her mouth had been.
Yeah, so it shows you how affectionate the Prophet ﷺ, and this itself more than any other picture that we can imagine. But it's still, you understand, when it comes in public, because you know what? Most of those kuffars, they did not do this unless they are in the public. But when go home, they're nothing. So we Muslims, we opposite. When we are in privacy, we do things that maybe the kuffar is not going to think about it.
MashaAllah.
But when you understand we are in public, we are shy and we are bashful and all these things. Because part of our haya, you understand?
Jimmy?
Because sometimes you maybe hold her hand, the next thing you understand, you want to kiss her, the next thing you understand, you're going to be standing under a tree and it's going to go.
Inshallah, we have limits, Sheikh. We do have limits.
Thank you anyway, and we shouldn't be scary, understand, or bashful to remind each other, same thing I'm expecting from you, if I say anything wrong or out of line, that you correct me, because the deen is not mine, it's not yours. It's something belong to Allah.
Allah is khair.
Our love have to be greater to the deen more than our personality. So it's not me and you.
Allah is khair.
I respect you, understand you as a person and as a scholar, and
Allah is khair.
I have no beef over it.
Yeah, and you have to know that I never leave feeling any kind of way when you speak up. I never do. My heart is always clean. Yeah, I'm open to anything.
Be freer.
Yeah, but like I said, we have to have limits. I just want to close by saying this: we have to have limits. But like I said, I don't feel uncomfortable with some affection in public, some affection within limits. That's my take on it. But
The
any
one
other,
on the right side, okay?
what's that?
Like the one all the way with the blue. This is.
You like that?
Yeah.
You like that? I know you like that because that's the kind of guy you are, right? I'm just joking with you. No, I'll be honest. I like this right here, man. I'm feeling this right here. I'm sorry. That's just me.
This is fair.
I'm feeling this too. What about that?
Especially after walking in Sa'i and Tawaf.
Yeah, she's tired, man. Give her a break.
Actually, he is the one who's tired. And she's trying to give him support.
All right, Tayyip. Anything else, Juan, you want to chime in on?
Just elaborate a little bit more on this concept of submission in culture. Is it different? I know it's different in different
Yeah, it's going to differ from culture to culture. Culture will have its impact. But obviously, again, like I said, what Islam gives us some basic guidelines, some basic parameters. So basically, the husband asks his wife to do something. It's within her capability. It's not haram. She should what? Try her best to do it. And that's what submissiveness is. And the husband is supposed to be what? And we're going to talk about this. Realistic expectations. This comes later. Is that the husband shouldn't ask her to do things which are beyond her what? Her capacity. He shouldn't just overload her. So yeah, everything he asks her to do is within her capability, but he asks her to do so much that she can't do it all. You follow? So basically, submissiveness is like within those parameters, but like I said, it'll differ from culture to culture. Yeah, there's no question. So,
if I have a hadith, if you don't mind.
تفضل يا شيخ.
The 2 points that you just mentioned, you understand that the submissive, the hadith of Rasulullah that if I'm permissible for me to command somebody to prostrate to somebody, or command the woman to prostrate to her husband. But in the same token, you find that the Prophet ﷺ talking about the slaves, not the wives. The slaves, if you give them something beyond their ability, فَأَعِينُوهُمْ, so give them assistance. So if this is your slave, you understand, and the Prophet ﷺ telling you, assist him. Can you imagine talking about your wife? Okay? So we can have some balance between both of them, you understand?
Like, anybody else want to chime in? You might have a comment, question, complaint, critique. Nothing? What time is that?
I appreciate the presence of everybody. Inshallah, we'll continue next week.
What time is it then?
Instead of 7:15, we'll make it 7 so we can have more time, inshallah.
Okay. What time is then?
We still have at least 10 minutes.
8 or 9 minutes?
And we'll give a break to the brother. Really appreciate you doing this while it's Monday, and I was thinking to suggest to make it Tuesday because we've gotten more strain in you understand? Being traveling and being fasting, all these things. And if you don't mind to explain that the man who carries the stake on his back all the time, what did the other scholars said about it?
But the other scholars, they said that he was the Rab, the Rabul in Nisa, that he used to beat his wives. So he's abusive. So you have both.
You know that a lot of brothers, understand, they have to hustle and make this dollar, you understand, they travel, and now as soon as they take this, they will run all the way to home with this, okay? And you see, he said in the class that you're supposed to be home, stop traveling, and all these things.
But I didn't say that. That's a problem. And I'm glad you said that like that, Sheikh. Because I'm going to make this comment too, or two comments to close. One is that one of the problems with classes, so to speak, is you have what the speaker says and what the people perceive the speaker to have said. And so people go home, and they go home with a perception or understanding of what was said, much different than what was intended by the speaker, and what he actually said. And so that's why it's critical to ask for clarity. Don't think you understand. Make sure that you understand. Because I remember once talking to, I teach inmates, and I was talking to them, and they had a question. In the course of answering the question, I said that a person who prays infrequently, but they pray, but they may miss a prayer here or there, or become lazy and not pray, whatever. A prayer here or there, but they're praying, but they pray infrequently. I said that person is not what? Does not become a non-Muslim. And so, after giving that answer, one of the brothers asked, he said, so basically, if we don't pray, it's okay. Okay? Did I understand you to say that, it's okay if we don't pray? I said, where did I say that? Where'd you get that from? But you guys understand, you see the difference between what was said and perception. So this is critical, is that, people walk away with the wrong perception, and then they end up what? Doing the wrong thing. So by no means am I telling anybody that they should just sit at home all day. But what we're saying is that, we need to spend what? Quality time. Find ways and means, be creative in what? Spending quality time. And a person just shouldn't be what? Gone all the time. That's the point. That's exactly what I'm saying. That's what I want you to take away from it. Don't quit your job and say, oh, the Sheikh said we shouldn't. No, that's not what I said. The second thing I want to say to close is that, again, I'm going to finish where I started. And that's, I'm happy to see everybody come out, and the attendance is what it is, and these classes are good, and may Allah put barakah in these classes. But they're not going to do us any good if we don't practice, if we don't implement. And one of the most frustrating things as a teacher is when you're teaching and you're teaching, but you don't see what? You don't see the impact on the people you're teaching. And they can repeat it back to you almost verbatim, but there's no practice. That's harmful knowledge. That's the knowledge that harms you. Because, as the Prophet said in the Hadith, he said, Al-Quran hujjatun laka aw alayk. The Quran is a proof for you or against you. If you practice it, it's for you. If you don't practice it, it's what? It's against you. There's no such thing as what? Not for you or not against you. So we have to understand, when we learn these things, we need to go home and what? Practice them. Put them into practice, Take written notes, mental notes, but then do what? Refer back to them and say, hey, am I being affectionate? Am I keeping score sometimes? And then try to get those. If it's a wrong thing, get it out of your life. If it's the right thing, try to what? Inculcate it. Anything else, ya ikhwan? Akhawat? We'll close with that. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين.
جزاك الله خيرا. Thank you.